Israeli Defense Forces confirmed late Tuesday that a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket misfired and hit a Gaza hospital, leading to a reported but unconfirmed hundreds of deaths. IDF spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari announced that Islamic jihadists in Gaza were responsible for the hospital destruction.
I can confirm that an analysis of the IDF operational systems indicates that a barrage of rockets was fired by terrorists in Gaza, passing in close proximity to the El Hali Al Maadi hospital in Gaza at the time it was hit. Intelligence from few sources that we have in our hands indicates that the Islamic Jihad is responsible for the failed rocket launch which hit the hospital in Gaza.
Meanwhile, this is a video of the failed missile as the Gazan Health Ministry, run by Hamas, tried but failed to blame Israeli airstrikes for that catastrophe. The IDF chief spokesperson even presented actual audio recordings in which Islamic Jihad members said out loud that they were responsible for that explosion. However, before the truth was revealed, this pro-Palestinian protest broke out at the Israeli embassy in Amman, Jordan. The violent crowd reportedly attempted to storm the gates and possibly even set that building on fire, which they were not able to do. And this was the scene in Beirut, Lebanon, as Arabs responded to Hezbollah's call for demonstrations in front of Israeli embassies worldwide. But since there isn't one in Beirut, the crowd went to the U.S. embassy and the French embassies instead. The unrest, including gunfire, continued at the U.S. embassy this morning. And Joe Biden arrived in Israel earlier today. The historic visit from the president to the war zone aimed to show the United States steadfast support for Israel in the face of Hamas' brutal terrorist attack that killed more than 1,400 Israelis and 29 Americans.
I wanted to be here today for a simple reason. I want the people of Israel, the people of the world, to know where the United States stands.
Anticipating Biden's visit, more than 50 Christian and Jewish faith leaders published a letter in the Jerusalem Post saying, "Mr. President, we need you to take stronger action on behalf of Israel." They wrote, "Please call for the immediate and unconditional release of all of the 199 hostages and do not pressure Israel into a premature ceasefire." The letter shared with Victory News goes on to say this: Israel must do all that is necessary to eliminate Hamas. It is not sufficient for Israel to degrade or even defeat this brutal terrorist regime, which oppresses its own people. Israel must completely destroy every Hamas terrorist so that evil is erased from human history. Biden did express support for Israel, but whether it was as strong as the faith leaders called for, well, that's yet to be determined. And during Joe Biden's remarks, he referenced the bombing of a hospital in Gaza Tuesday by a misfired terrorist rocket.
And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things.
Due to the bombing of that hospital yesterday, the president's plan to meet with Jordan's King Abdullah, Egyptian's president, and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, well, that was canceled. Greg.
Well, a heartfelt letter written by the Israeli Defense Forces chief of the general staff on Monday was shared by many after the IDF posted it on social media. Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi sent the letter to soldiers and commanders and reservists following the Hamas invasion on Gaza on Saturday. In it, the general tells his comrades that the state of Israel is at war and will prevail. It also accuses Hamas terror attacks, which began on October the 7th, of trying to destabilize Israel's sovereignty. The letter goes on to say, "We took a hard hit and we are responsible, but now the initiative is in our hands. The war will be difficult and long, and the IDF will prevail." Right now, let's talk with the president of Counterpoint Institute for Policy Research and Education, Dr. Shea Bradley Farrell. Welcome to Victory News.
Thanks so much for having me, Greg.
Well, that IDF letter to the soldiers sounds like they're in strong spirits, but the misfire of a terrorist rocket and its landing and explosion at the Gaza hospital have Hamas blaming Israel now. There are calls for the resignation of the Palestinian President Abbas. Much of the Arab world is protesting outside of Israeli and U.S. embassies. Hezbollah is calling for a day of rage. Could this deception draw in more nations against Israel?
Yes, and it's very strategic to try to get that to happen. I'm actually sitting over here in Central Europe right now in Hungary, and Hungary has been a great friend to Israel. But throughout Europe, what I am hearing on the ground and in news reports is already a turning against Israel, especially in the mainstream media over here, saying that Israel has already done too much, gone too forward, and it's not just self-defense anymore, but it's a humanitarian issue. I totally disagree, and I'm very concerned about this. This is a result of the moral relativism that's going on in the world. Israel needs to stand up and cut Hamas out at the root, so this is done once and for all.
Okay, now Joe Biden is on the ground in Israel to show allegiance and learn what Israel is preparing for Gaza land responses and recovery hostages. Dr. Shea, we continue to hear the word proportionality, as you were kind of alluding to there. When the media addresses Israel, when children are beheaded and slaughtered, women are raped and taken hostage, what is proportional response?
Proportional response is what Israel is planning on doing, going in, invading. It's going to be a hard battle for Israel because this combat, urban combat like this, is in a very densely populated area. It's costly in terms of lives, for sure. You don't know what's around the corner. You don't know if the car next door to the house that you're in invading is going to go off with a bomb. It's a serious situation. But what you have to understand is Hamas does not play by rules. When I heard that that rocket had gone off, killing people, supposedly, or at least attacking that hospital, I figured it was Hamas or the Islamic Jihad group because they hide in schools, they hide in hospitals. They took away the keys and the IDs of the Palestinians who were trying to flee. They use their own people as shields.
Now, you posted the success of the Abraham Accords, and Saudi Arabia is considering signing them. It may have contributed to Hamas and Iran's attack against Israel. Former President Trump spoke to the press before heading into court today. He said this.
The attack on Israel should have never happened, and it wouldn't have happened if they had a different president. I can tell you that. Thank you.
So let me ask you, if Trump were currently in office rather than Biden, do you think we would be facing the actions of Hamas, Iran, even Russia and Ukraine?
Of course not. Trump stood firmly for a model of deterrence against the bad actors that are in this world. You know, I was just at a pro-Israel summit conference that I spoke at here in Hungary, and that's what our Israeli friends are concerned with, is that there's this leniency in the West towards terrorists, towards people who are bad actors. If Trump were still in office, no. Putin would not have invaded Ukraine. I don't believe that this would have happened. And we have to get across to people this, as I said, moral relevancy it's going to come back and hurt us because we've seen a rise in terrorist attacks here in Europe over the past week. So it's not just in Israel. This is a fight against Western civilization, not just against Israel.
You're exactly right. It reminds me, if you've studied history, the early 1930s, late 1930s, when the bloodletting of Israeli or Jews, and they have a homeland now. We got to keep that. Dr. Shea, thank you so much. Back to you in just a moment. The Victory Channel, Kenneth Copeland Ministries, and Eagle Mountain International Church are working with vetted and proven organizations in Israel to bring immediate aid to families in Judea and Samaria who are cut off from the life-saving supplies they need. Organizations such as Karen Hayesod, they are helping new immigrants that live in the absorption centers close to Gaza to relocate to safer areas. Imagine leaving Ukraine only to have this happen in your first year in your new homeland. They also supply Israeli families with critical needed supplies. You can help. Will you stand with us? Will you stand with Israel? Call 877-281-6297 or visit kcm.org/give Israel to offer your financial support. 100% of your gift will bring relief to those lives that are devastated by these attacks. All right, as we go today, remember, this is a phone number you can call to pray, 877-281-6297. A licensed prayer minister is ready to pray with you. Our thanks to Dr. Shea Bradley Farrell, and especially you. Thank you for joining us. We return at 5 Eastern, 4 Central with Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. Make sure you join us then. The world reports the problem. Victory Channel brings you the answer. Whatever's born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that's overcome the world, our faith. So stay in faith. God bless you. We'll see you this evening.